but it's all good. So you got a debut album. You got a lot going on, reimagining some jazz classics. So you ready to hop in? You good to go?
Let's do this.
Okay, I love it. So the debut album, Between the Lines, it's a big deal. And before we get into that, I want to know this.
Mhm.
6 years ago, this pandemic changed all of our lives, especially musicians. How did you get through that era, and how has it influenced the way that you create and live your life in 2026?
Wow, that's such a great question. And I didn't step into jazz fully until the pandemic. And
Okay.
I wonder if that's because everything shut down. Professionally, I was making my money off of, musical theater, doing commercial work, and print. And during the pandemic, all of that shut down. It had just so happened I did have an opportunity to perform at the Bermuda Music Festival, but that also closed down, which was a blessing in many ways because it gave me time to then prepare the material that I wanted to present for the music festival. But so during the pandemic is when I started gathering the musicians and we started creating music together. And I don't know if I would have had that opportunity if it wasn't for the pandemic because I was also doing other, things in my career that were put on hold. So it definitely brought me to jazz. And jazz has always kind of been in the background of my life. It was never at the foreground. So it was the perfect opportunity to focus my energy, on the music, but through my words, through my story, through my voice. And it was the start of shaping the album. And since then, I have been singing full time and I've been singing jazz full time. And now I have this album. So it really impacted my art in that way that I was able to create from my own voice and from my love of jazz. And in sharing that, with audiences, I think, you know, um, there's something very powerful about sharing your story. And in putting up this album and performing these songs, it's giving me a chance to finally talk about, my truth, my identity, my heritage, what it means to be a woman. And I think, when you start sharing your stories, then you realize that you're not as alone as you may feel. And you start to see how we're connected in more ways than we are, divided. So it really brings me closer to myself. And I think it brings me closer to other people. And hopefully, the feelings are mutual.
I think having these conversations that I'm fortunate enough to be able to do with musicians and creatives around the world is that we all are way more alike. We're way more aligned. We're not as divided as we're told in all of the different media sources. But what's interesting about you coming to jazz during COVID is that I was hoping, because I've been doing this for 15 years, I was hoping there would have been some sea change, some level of going back to the organic roots of music, the real roots of American music, which was jazz music.
Mm.
And I saw little pieces of it. I went to a Bobby Watson had a Plex Pod show in Kansas City, and it was everybody parked their cars 6 feet apart. You open up the hatch, and then they were up on stage. And I had a downbeat shirt on at one of the shows, and some big country boy was like, "What's downbeat mean?" And I'm like, "Man, is this guy gonna mess with me? Like, what's going on here?" And I was like, "It's a magazine." He was like, "For what?" And I was like, "Okay." And I said, "It's for jazz." And he was being completely serious. And as it turned out, he started listening to jazz over the pandemic with his daughter. There was nothing going on. He got to
Wow.
this place where they accidentally found a jazz station. So that was my pipe dream, was that there would be all of these people that you would typically not think would get into this art, this music, this art form, but they finally did. So the fact that you found it and that was kind of your clarion call during this time is wonderful.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like jazz found me. It found me a long time ago in college when I was pursuing a degree to become a pharmacist, and then I realized I hated science, and I was like, "Oh God, I gotta rethink this whole thing,"
Yeah.
And the choir, as it turns out, was holding auditions, and if you got in, it would pay for your tuition. But the catch was you had to join two choirs. So there was a classical choir that's what I thought I was going to be doing, but then there was a jazz choir. So it wasn't until I was in college and I joined this jazz choir that I discovered all of these jazz standards. And it really planted a seed in me that wouldn't grow until years later. Because even though I knew these jazz standards, I got pulled into the direction of theater. And that's ultimately what became my major. I booked a Broadway tour of Dreamgirls, and that's what brought me to New York. And so for years, I was performing in musical theater. And like I said, the pandemic gave me the opportunity to bring jazz to the forefront of what I do as a profession. But there was something very powerful about discovering jazz for the first time, and to feel, a connection to something, especially being biracial and bicultural, living between worlds and not really feeling like you fit in anywhere in particular. And then all of a sudden, there's something that just pulls you and feels so natural and so comfortable.
Yeah.
But it was a process that took time to really come to the forefront of my career and my life.
So let me ask you this. Were you originally from New York?
I was not originally from New York. So my father he's white American. And when he was in college, he decided to join the Peace Corps. So they shipped him off to a remote village in West Africa, in Ghana, called Borada. And he was teaching math in the village school where my mom was teaching English. And they met, fell in love, and then they had me, as one does, when you join the Peace Corps. He came back to the US with an African wife and a little mixed race baby. But we ultimately ended up in Texas so that my parents could continue their education. So I was born in Ghana, raised in Texas, and then I moved to New York later in my adult years. But so growing up, I was between continents, cultures, and identity. So I feel like I'm a little bit of everything, but
Yeah.
my dad would tell me I'm the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
So
I love
I'm a
it.
peace corps baby. I came in peace.
Yeah. Uh-huh. There you go. Exactly. So when the jazz tentacles took hold, what were some musicians? What were some singers? Who were some influences that swayed the way that you approach this art form?
Yeah. So like I said, I discovered jazz through the choir, through the jazz choir. And so we started off with standards that were from, the 20s and 30s. So there was, all the all the usual suspects from, the Gershwin to the Jerome Kern. But, the singer that resonated with me right away was Ella Fitzgerald. And I think that's because we sing in the same, register. She's a soprano. So just naturally, when I was hearing her sing, I could emulate her because the music just sat in my voice. But later on, of course, there's Billie Holiday, there's Lena Horne, but then I discovered Diane Reeves. She was the inspiration for me wanting to perform Afro Blue. Just the way that she commands the music as a musician, and then the way that she interacts with her musicians. I mean, it just took my love for jazz to a whole nother level. And then hearing what, Robert Glasper did, the way he reharms music and he
Yeah.
blends genres with jazz, that also resonated with me. Being multicultural, I'm a blend of so many different things. And so it just felt natural for me to also do that with the music. And I think that's what encouraged me to see how far I could push the genre beyond just your traditional jazz.
Yeah. So the one thing that forms, whether you're a performer or you're in the audience and you love this art form, one thing that forms that your basis for going into this music is live music. What was the first real seminal live jazz show that you saw that blew you away, that whether consciously or subconsciously laid a foundation for the way that you approach the stage and love this music?
Wow, yeah, for me it was Diane Reeves. And I wasn't even there live to see her. That just goes to show the power of what she did. It was a recording that she did. I, I believe, it was at the White House for Bill Clinton. And yeah, I mean, she stood on that stage as herself. She closed her eyes, she opened her mouth, and she just sang. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in all this technology that we have. You know, we can create atmosphere and do lights and choreography, and especially me coming from a background in musical theater where you can't just stand and sing a song. You know,
Yeah.
you've got to jump around and do handstands and change clothes. And here was a woman who was just standing in her truth in this moment, connecting with the song and just living. And it was so powerful that I didn't even have to be there in the room to feel it, you know. It translated through, you know, the camera. And it was just, it was so inspiring. It was that moment when I heard a song, and instead of being intimidated by it or being in awe of it, I wanted to sing it too, you know. It's
Yeah.
like I'm gonna try it and find my way through it. And I think that was the difference.
I love hearing these vignettes of performers that have been at inaugurations and of all of the plethora of things that we can mourn with what's happening to America now, especially with the arts. I hear these stories and I hope that we get back to that. We get back to celebrating these icons that go to our house, the White House, and do this. So that is my lead into this. I want to ask you this. With everything that's happening, you're definitely a product of what America is genuinely about. Bringing in cultures, bringing in different countries, celebrating the fact that we allow and welcome anybody in this country.
Mhm.
And we're all going through our things right now, living in this world of 2026 America. But as an entertainer, as a musician, you have this gift of allowing us to escape into this echo chamber of heaven, so to speak, for a little while. Is that something that's in your mind when you're able to put a debut album out, get on stage? Are you thinking more about giving your bandmates and the audience a little bit of escape from the chaos of what we're living in this country now?
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing about art is that it gives us a space where we can all come together despite, you know, the differences that we may have, whether it's political or gender or age. You know, we can come together to not only enjoy something, but experience something together. And so I think the first part of that is just being able to get people in a room.
Yeah.
That's so important. And then there is a sense of responsibility as an artist, you know, people are coming to see me, but I also want them to realize that it's about them too. So I'm leading by example. I'm setting myself up as, you know, you can look at me, you can hear my story, I can tell you what I went through, but at the same time, I hope you can see yourself in it because this is about you just as much as it is about me. And then when we can all have that collective experience of you know going through something together, witnessing something together, I think that's what bonds us and that's what brings us together. And at the end of the day, we realize that it's so much more than where we come from or who we are or what we agree to disagree on and vice versa. It's about humanity.
Yeah.
You know, it's about humanity and giving space for all of us to just be human.
So with this debut album, I want to cover two big moons that have gone into making this. One part of it is it's your debut. This is your shout out into this jazz community, right? And then there's another part of it where you come into this process with a blank canvas. There's literally an infinite amount of material that you can cover and that you can put your spin on. How did you approach that canvas and come up with this artistic rendering of what is ultimately the final CD?
I think, you know, throughout this entire process, I just wanted to be intentional. I wanted to be honest about what I was doing. And so I led coming from a place of truth. And I didn't really know how to explain what it meant to me until after I had recorded the songs. What drew me to the songs was how they resonated in my body. Sometimes I would get chills. Other times I just loved singing this one, you know, melody. And so I think how it felt in my body and in my voice is what connected me to the song. And it just so happens that I feel in so many ways, you know, the music kind of parallels who you are just naturally, you know? And so understanding the connection after the fact was almost like a beautiful unfolding of, of just this whole process coming together, you know, naturally, but it was guided by the truth and just what felt right. And ultimately, all of these standards are what have shaped me over time. And it's given me a place to stand in my own voice. Like I was, theater has played a big role in just in me because I did it for so long growing up. But I was always in a situation where everything is scripted. The writer has written out your words. The choreographer has told you how to move. There's blocking. So you stand here and you say your line, and then you go, to the right and you say your line there. And this is just me taking complete authorship and ownership, not only of the music, but of my story. And so that has been very powerful. And sometimes, life is lived forwards and it's understood backwards. So I chose the music that I loved, that resonated with me, that gave me an emotional feeling. And then looking back at it, I understood the story of how it has connected with me as I've grown into where I am and who I am today, which is the Black Madonna.
So I got to know on a cerebral level,
Yes.
when all of the artwork and all of the mixing and mastering and everything that goes in, the hours and hours that maybe fans don't realize that go into a project, and you're holding it, and you're looking at it, and it's physical and it's actually real, what kind of adrenaline rush is that?
I mean, my heart's beating really fast right now, and I'm shaking a little bit because this is my first podcast interview, by the way,
Oh,
with
good.
the album, and so it's really becoming real. And in
Yeah.
so many ways, it's true. I spent hours and hours in the studio. I've never made an album before. There were so many. I had to grow so much, and I feel like I birthed this album, but at the same time, this album birthed me.
Yeah.
Because it made me step up in ways that I never knew that I could. And so it was just, I get emotional thinking about it because it's one thing when you have an idea in your head. It's another when it actually comes, alive. It's real. It's something tangible that I can hold. And it's a whole nother experience to be able to then share it with someone. And I'm very anxious to hear how people are going to respond to the music because it's just been kept to me for so, so long.
Yeah.
So,
Asking about COVID up front, I think the reason why I keep getting hung up on that question is because I did so many interviews during that time. There were so many
oh,
artists that had itineraries that lasted months and years long that just evaporated in moments.
yeah.
So whenever I see your albums coming out on March 27th, I always feel like that's kind of the rebirth of like this art form because that was the time when everything melted away. So the beginnings of this album is going to be the beginnings of touring and doing all of this, and it seems rather triumphant. Is there anywhere in your mind when you think March that you have flashbacks back to 2020 and any of that time?
Oh, definitely. And the whole process, I've had to just take it one step at a time. Even when I learned the songs, I'm not really sure I knew what I was getting myself into.
Yeah.
It was just like, just really having to be present in the moment. And, it's amazing, one small step after another consistently, and before you know it, you've come so, so far. But I also I'm very grateful. I think there's something to be said for resiliency. And the next single that I'm releasing is called Pick Yourself Up, and it frames resiliency as a choice. And I think during COVID, with all that was happening, you know, we had to make a choice for ourselves. We had to decide if we were gonna stay down when we fell down, or if we were gonna get up, if we were gonna rise and, reclaim our dignity and move forward. And I think that's also, what COVID represented for me, and I'm sure a lot of people, is how do we pick up the pieces? How do we lift ourselves and move forward? It just so happens that this time I'm moving forward on my own terms.
Yeah.
And I hope that that message comes through and inspires, people to move forward on your own terms.
And I think it was emblematic of different places on the planet. And New York was is always the epicenter of humanity.
Yeah.
And that having watching New York come back to life and all the boroughs and everything, that was a big deal. So you mentioned Ella Fitzgerald, and I gotta know if you could climb into a time machine and go back in time and see one performance anywhere with your own eyes, and you get to see it happen. Where are you going?
Oh man. Where or who am I going to see?
Well, I mean, who are you going to see? What venue? What year? What's the inverted pyramid of where you're going and
I
to
see.
see?
I'm going to Harlem during the
Okay.
height of the Harlem Renaissance. I want to see the men and the women walking on the streets, parading themselves. I want to see the dandies. I want to see the dancers at the Cotton Club. I want to hear Duke Ellington with his big band. I want to see Cab Calloway. I want to see all of these legendary icons that came from that era that built jazz, into what we know it to be today. I want to see Josephine Baker. That's where I want to go. I want to go to that time.
So I have always wanted to be in the Apollo when that shy little Ella Fitzgerald came on stage and all those people were waiting like vultures to take her down. And she
Yeah.
just boomed out like an angel and just changed life, changed every particle of what we would experience in jazz from there on out. You know, that would be the moment to see that place erupt at the end of that song. I mean, there was no other place, even to this day, that's more of a lion's den that you're going to walk on stage than the Apollo,
Yeah,
right?
people are vicious. People are
Yes.
vicious. And I had the opportunity to perform at the Apollo, and it's just so surreal to think so much history has
Yeah.
come from that one place, and it's diverse. I mean, you've everyone from, Ella Fitzgerald to Michael Jackson to Shaka Khan. I mean, just there's such a wide range of talent that's moved through that one venue. And hey, it's New York. If you can make it here,
Yeah.
you can make it anywhere.
Yeah, you can. One of my guilty pleasures is to go to Dollar Trees, and they have a book section of all these overpublished books. And there was this pictorial book so well done on the Apollo, and I had no idea of the ownership battles in the beginning and what the fights that happened behind the scenes to keep that open and keep it vital. It was amazing. And then the backdrop was that all of these owners predominantly fought to keep all of these musicians coming in, and there was so many careers that started there. You know, it's
Yeah.
wild. You
I mean,
know,
my career started there.
yeah.
So when I moved from Texas to New York, it was to be a part of this Broadway national tour, Dreamgirls, and they decided to open it at the Apollo. So when I look at the journey of just how things have progressed for me, and when I first moved to New York, I moved to Harlem. I opened at the Apollo Theater. I traveled the world. I came back. I'm back in Harlem. you know, Harlem has been so good to me, and it is the birthplace, or at least a place that nurtured jazz. So jazz has been around me. It's been a part of my journey. It was just it feels like it was in the background, but I really like to describe it as a seed that was planted in me, and it's been growing for years. And this album represents like the first bloom of it really just opening in a way that the world can see it.
The beginning of the bouquet. Let me ask you this.
Hmm.
Everyone has a perception of you as you walk into this debut album. Family, friends, fans, bandmates, everyone on the business end, but you run the show. What is your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, that's why I created the Black Madonna,
Yeah.
right? So I wanted to reclaim the original meaning of Madonna, which is Italian for my lady, Madonna, and it was used to show reverence for a woman who carried dignity and authority and grace. And there was something about reclaiming that word as a woman who's shaped by blackness. It felt very powerful, but I wanted to extend it as an invitation to other women to claim their own authority. And then, I intentionally spell black BLCK.
Mhm.
I removed the A to create space, and to invite people to pause, to look again and read between the lines, because that's what connects directly to the album. So it's very much about, I'm in the season of authorship, and even if you bring that back to the Harlem Renaissance, it was about, defining yourself, not letting the world define you. So, this is a very important season of my life because I'm not waiting for permission. I'm giving it to myself, and I'm showing up fully realized in my truth. They're my words. This is my interpretation, and I just hope that encourages more people to be able to be honest with themselves and step out, fully realized, for who they want to be, and even if you don't think that you're where you ultimately want to be in life, well, let's dream it up. That's what the Black Madonna is as well. She's a vision of me and my highest self.
Yeah.
And she's the first step of me stepping into, that version of me that I want to be.
So the triumphant debut, Between the Lines, comes out on March 27th. I'm sure it'll be streaming everywhere, but if anybody wants to benefit you as an artist, where can they pick up a copy, download, catch you live, any of the good business? Where do they go?
Yeah, wonderful. So I would love for people to follow me on Spotify and Apple Music at The Black Madonna. That's BLCK Madonna. Those are the two big ones. I would love for you to follow me on YouTube, Instagram, social media, TikTok, and that's where I'll be posting, information about touring, and any updates on what's going on in my life and in my career.
Wonderful. I will put all these links in the show notes. This has been an absolute joy. Great to meet you. Best of luck. It's like a rocket ship getting ready to explode into space. So good luck with all of it. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much, Joe. And I love what you're doing too. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed just listening to your podcasts. And
Thank you.
Yeah, we need more of you. Can you duplicate yourself?
Yeah, we'll try to do that multiplicity thing that Michael Keaton did back in the day. We'll see what we can do.
Maybe we'll clone you as AI.
Here we go. That's it. Exactly. I might need a little bit.
Neon Jazz.